Hello guys, Mobby Nerd here, and it's been a while since I've spoken about this topic, but let's talk about autism. More specifically, high functioning autism. Did you know that the unemployment rate for those with high functioning autism is 90%? That's really high, like absurdly high. If you didn't know, I myself was diagnosed with autism at a young age, so I feel a little bit qualified to chime in on the subject. First and foremost, I'd like to apologize. I don't really script these videos, so there will be lots of jump cuts. When you're on the high end of the autistic spectrum, most people tend to not realize you're autistic at all. It becomes a little unreasonable to expect your job to make any accommodations for you, because chances are they're not going to believe you need them. Most people just won't know, and that could work for or against you depending on how you handle certain situations. My job at Kroger's wasn't bad, but some situations eventually became too much for me to handle, and I ultimately ended up quitting my job. Do I regret quitting my job? Yes, absolutely. I felt horrible. I felt like this is something that's so simple to somebody else. All these situations, they handle them as if it's nothing, and I can't seem to tackle them. And I did not understand why that was. Like, here's a good example. And I touched a little bit on this in my last video where I discussed ways to cope with high functioning autism. Well, ways that I would, anyways. And one really weird one was cart corralling. My job at Kroger's, one of the things we have to do is bring in shopping carts. Now, during the winter, for most people, they absolutely hated it. And while I myself also didn't like going out in the cold, dealing with slush, cars, and carts. Sounds like an album, Slush, Cars, and Carts. But dealing with that was not nearly as nerve-wracking to me as doing it in the summertime, which coincidentally was when the job became too much for me and I had to just throw in the towel. I'm a bugaphobe. I can't help it. I've determined that a huge factor when it comes to flying insects is the sound of buzzing. It sounds like it's way closer to me than it really is, and I close up. Being outdoors, going on camping trips, stuff like that has always been a challenge for me. But I found that a good hack was wearing headphones. If I cut off the sense of sound and focus on something else, then the act of going outside during a hot summer's day where there's all sorts of insects buzzing around becomes a little more bearable. I still don't like them. I still don't want them to touch me, but I can do it. You don't have that luxury when you're on the job, because obviously wearing headphones while you're outside in a parking lot doesn't necessarily stack up the safety measures. But let me touch a little bit on more as to why that was a problem for me. You see, at a grocery store, there are people who return bottles. They put their bottles in the carts. Bottles have soda in them usually, or some other sticky substance, which in turn attracts wasps and bees. So, in the summertime, all the cart corrals are swarming with bees. To another person, well, don't bother them, they won't bother you. Rope them up, let's go. To me, like I said in my last video, nope city, my dudes. I can't do it. The combination of them buzzing, the fact that I don't want them anywhere near me, it's difficult, too difficult. It may seem like it's nothing to somebody else, but to me, it's just like, it's so hard to explain, even to the camera here. It's very hard to explain, just take my word for it. It's not easy. It wasn't easy. Dealing with waves of customers who want you to not only bag their groceries in specific ways, which is totally normal, but also tie the bags up and do other fancy things with them. Here's a fun fact that I didn't think was too common, but apparently it is. Most people in the autistic spectrum don't handle doing complex things like tying knots. I don't know if it's just the way your brain processes it. It's just not that simple. So it's a simple act of tying a bag. I was so ashamed of this, but even that was a challenge to me, and it would slow things down, which led to a train of angry customers. And who's at the end of that? Me. And my coworkers, you begin to assume things. They may not necessarily be true, but you tend to assume that people are thinking, wow, this guy's ridiculous. What is he, stupid? Why can't he do that? Why can't he simply tie the bags in a knot? Why is that so hard? These doubts stack up. When you're in the autistic spectrum, you gotta really think about, like, here's a better way to think about it. Imagine you're introverts and you're extroverts, right? Everybody has a battery. Everybody, whether you're autistic or not, you have a battery. Extroverts gain energy. Their batteries are charged by being around people and being social and talking to people.
Introverts
gain their energy by taking time to detach from everybody. They need time to themselves. I myself was diagnosed with Asperger's at the time in the autistic spectrum. Now it's all ASD. It's all the same thing. But it's a social disorder. I don't like saying disorder. I just don't. But that's what they call it. Now imagine being an introvert with an even smaller battery. My hours were a lot shorter. And there were times people might wonder, like, why don't you work more hours? It's just because you get overloaded. Eventually, you crash. And you just can't be around people anymore. It's just something that I myself am still learning to accept. It has caused some issues among my friends where they feel like I just don't want to be around them. And it's not that. It's just that sometimes I just need time to myself. I mean, I think anybody can relate to that to some degree. These are the reasons why the unemployment rate for those in the autistic spectrum, specifically, mind you, this is specifically for high functioning people with ASD. That's why the rate is so ridiculously high, 90%. It's actually lower for those with more severe symptoms, believe it or not. It's so weird. But I could talk about other situations, like my time where I had to help a blind customer on a regular basis. I'd help a blind customer shop. And this person is very specific about what he wants, and it's time sensitive because he catches the bus. For anybody, this is a good deed. This is a nice thing to do. But because at the time I was very new to the grocery store and did not know where everything was, with a customer who's very specific about what he wants and where he needs to be after the fact, it was almost impossible for me to do it. All the while I'm helping this guy shop, I'm navigating around busy people who don't want to move because when you work at a grocery store, you come to realize some people are just really rude and just don't care about what you got. They don't care if this guy's blind. They want to get what they want to get and they don't want to get out of the way. And you just learn that some people are inconsiderate. But hey, that's life. But that pressure on top of those expectations, it can crush you. And I don't really know how they can rectify this. What can be done about this? It's hard. It's a challenge that I'm still struggling with to this day. Finding a job that you can do without crashing, without burning. Situations where you get people who may raise their voice with you. Now, going through school, in all my classes, anybody in my classes can attest to this. When somebody raises their voice with you, it doesn't really end well. It's gonna go one of two ways depending on the person. They're either gonna get angry themselves, which is gonna result in them getting fired, or they're gonna wanna avoid the situation entirely. It's one of those two. You typically don't really do well when people raise their voice with you. You just don't. No one likes being yelled at. That's just a solid fact. But it can be commonplace at a job where your boss or manager is not happy with how you're doing your work, which has happened to me on several occasions where I'm not bringing in enough shopping carts or someone else isn't doing their job, which leads to more workflow for you. And if you can't keep up, well, you're making it harder for everybody else. Again, that pressure can make things difficult. I'm sorry if I ramble. This isn't scripted. And I'm jump cutting a lot. But These are just some things that somebody in that spectrum would have to deal with, which could be a little more difficult than your average Joe. Furthermore, we come to find out that going to college, most people with high functioning autism, about 35%, have either attempted to go to college and did not get admitted, or dropped out at some point. And I feel like I can chime in on this topic as well, because I myself have attempted to go to Baker. I've been going through Baker College, and really a lot of what they report on this, and by they I mean like the Autistic Alliance of Michigan, it adds up with my own experiences in college and in school in general. And it's like this. The best way to describe the situation is like this. Throughout all of grade school for me, and mind you, when I was going, they were just now putting things into place to help people who needed extra help. Because for some of the schools I went to, it outright didn't exist, which led to me being transferred to so many different schools. That's a video for another day. But through grade school, I had aides. Wait, that sounds very wrong. You have somebody there whose job it is to specifically help you. You have somebody specifically for you in all your classes, and you have classes specifically designed for people with special needs. The classes are smaller. They have people who can be one-on-one with you. You have time to step back and just, take a break if you're overwhelmed. You don't get that in college. You can't get that in college. Classrooms are typically larger. You don't have somebody who can work with you one-on-one. In high school, I had an assistant to help me who was so dedicated to her job that most people thought she was my mom, which actually was a point of contention for me. But that's a story for another day. But you don't get that in college. The fact is, people with autism work and learn at a different pace than people who don't have it. And when you're in the autistic spectrum and you're higher functioning, the fact is you either jump into the fire and hope for the best and try to graduate and push through, or you swallow your pride and you take part in programs that definitely aren't meant for someone like you. I was on programs where I just did not belong. There are people with much more severe symptoms and things in that spectrum, whereas I'm just kind of there and you don't belong. I was on programs like PIC, where it's getting people outside of their house who literally can't go and function without somebody there with them. I don't belong there. While yes, there are certain social hurdles and things that I definitely need to learn how to deal with, having Asperger's, where it's like, without that little push, you're just gonna, I knocked over my cell phone. Without that little push, you're gonna hermit yourself out. You're gonna completely shut yourself in. That's why the anime, by the way, Welcome to the NHK, resonated so well with me, because the typical Japanese NEET is straight up somebody with high functioning autism. In my personal opinion, it's one and the same. You don't want to leave your room. You don't want to go out in the world, because it's so much easier, especially in the age of technology when you have the internet, to just stay in your room and not go outside or socialize with people. Because you don't have to. You have that barrier between physically being with that person. And some people straight up use that as an outlet to supplement just being out and about. And that's not necessarily a good thing. Couple that with the expectations of your average college student staying in dorms. I can tell you from my own personal experience, I would never see myself being comfortable staying in any type of living situation with more than 2 people. Again, colleges can't accommodate for that. You can get a tutor. I had a tutor. And even with tutoring, because of the rate that I handle doing things and assignments, I just couldn't keep up. I couldn't. And I was going to a college that was considered to be a little bit easier because of that. I mean, a little bit more flexible, smaller room sizes. But even that was just too much. And I can understand why, in most cases, it results in either you not making the cut to begin with, or you eventually dropping out. I'm not making this video for pity. I'm making this video just to raise awareness that this is a thing. This is a huge thing. 90% unemployment rate. Whoa, huge. 35% don't even make it through college. Holy, that's just insane to me. But I understand because I've been there. Thank you for watching. I apologize that I rambled a little bit. These videos aren't scripted, but I hope to raise awareness about this whole topic in general. And I want to talk about this stuff more in the future as well. I'm Bobby Nerd, and if you like this video, then hit me a thumbs up, maybe subscribe. That always helps. And even if you don't, well, I hope I was able to at least help teach you a little bit more about what it's like dealing with high functioning autism. Because if I help even one person, then in my opinion, this was totally worth it. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.
Your